My New Year's resolution was to stop cheating. I only made it 10 days until he caught me. I told myself this year would be different and that I'd stop lying and sneaking around, but old habits die hard, and my husband wasn't as blind as I hoped. I should have known better. 10 days into the new year, I messed up again. I shattered everything my husband and I had spent years building. Now, here I am left alone in the mess that I created, unsure of where to even start. I had to do my confession here because I have nowhere else to do it or someone to vent to. I don't want sympathy, and I'm also not trying to make excuses for what happened. I know I was in the wrong, and perhaps by getting it all out, I'll finally be able to understand why things turned out the way they did. Hello, I'm Alyssa. I'm 31, and 5 years ago, I got married to my husband Jake, who is 34. He's the kind of man I hoped for in a husband. He's kind, gentle, and more in love with me than anyone I've ever met, which makes what I've done more terrible. I made a resolution this year to stop cheating because I was scared I was going to get caught, and I didn't like the fact that I was hurting my husband. I told myself I would leave that part of me behind and focus on the man who has given me nothing but love and loyalty. For 10 days, I felt proud of myself because I was finally doing the right thing, but on the 10th day I broke, and the consequences of that choice are too hard for me to handle. As for me, when I made the New Year's resolution to not sneak around, I had one understanding. I knew it would not be an easy one because cheating had been a part of my life for the past 2 years now. Each time I did it, a part of me was telling me that it was wrong, but I just couldn't bring myself to stop. It wasn't a question of love, or even the absence of love for Jake. It was the idea of not wanting to settle for what was boring and ordinary. There was no thrill in it, and I deserved more in life. And that was the justification I gave myself whenever I felt I needed one for my behavior, or whenever I felt guilty. For someone who married a perfect husband, I'm ashamed of myself. Because my husband is a hard worker, he's considerate, and he provides for me in every aspect. He's the type of man most women hope to marry. And yet, there I was, throwing it all away for meaningless flings. I hated myself for it, but at the same time, I couldn't seem to stop. You might be wondering why I made that New Year's resolution, and it's because the things I did were beginning to hurt my husband, and I didn't like it. Last year, I met with one of my husband's colleagues, and one thing led to the other, and we started sleeping with each other. Unknowingly to me, he always mocked my husband about it at work, and my husband never said a word to me. From my understanding of the situation now, he had always defended me and asked the colleague to stop speaking ill of his wife. I was not surprised that he never asked me about it when it first started, because my husband knew how much I hated to be accused wrongly, and if he dared to tell me anything without evidence, I would definitely get mad at him, and that would make our home hell for months. So I'm guessing he didn't want that to happen, and that's why he didn't ask me. But I got to find out about this when my husband came back one day from work with his bruises on his face. Then I asked him what happened. He said he and his colleague, Eric, got into a fight. Eric was the colleague I was cheating on my husband with. So my heart started pounding hard when I heard his name. I was desperate to know why he did this, and at the time praying that he didn't expose me publicly to my husband. So I demanded an account of what happened while I was treating his wound. And my husband told me after multiple times of trying not to say anything, because he said that saying those words out loud would hurt him as well. But I forced it out of him. He said that he was just scolding Eric about dragging the rest of the team down due to his laziness, and Eric got angry. Then he started making a fuss about how perfectly my husband acted and pretended like he's got everything and his marriage is quite fine when he can't even satisfy his wife at home, and I was out there seeking pleasure and satisfaction from other men. And that Eric even boasted that he was one of the men sleeping with me. And that when my husband learned how to keep his home, then he could speak to him. I couldn't believe that stupid betrayer could utter such nonsense to my husband. And that's why my husband got into a fight with him, because he needed Eric to keep his mouth shut and stop saying rubbish. I felt so bad. In order for my husband not to suspect a thing, you needed to see me that day. I was acting all up, shouting and being all rageful and telling my husband to come. Let's go back to Eric, and that I needed to teach him how to respect people's husbands and wives. My husband told me not to worry, that he had dealt with the situation already, but I was still shouting. How dare he try that rubbish? I was so mad and started crying. I cried so hard that day, and I apologized to my husband for the humiliation he went through. My husband said that he hoped that what Eric said wasn't true. I was so disheartened that my husband would ask me that. I told him I don't even know Eric properly, except for once when I met him at his workplace the day I stopped by. My husband believed me and told me to ignore whatever he said, that he knows his wife will never do such a thing. Because my husband knew how well I do criticize cheaters, he was so sure never to count or view me as one. He gave it to me and said, "Merry Christmas," as we crossed into the new year. I flipped through the pages of that book and felt like the worst person on this earth. Jake had taken his time to take these valuable photographs of every beautiful moment we have had. It was a picture from our wedding day, a note where he rewrote the words he once said about love at first sight when we first met, and a little trinket, like the receipt from the restaurant where we had our first date. I was in tears. I was starting my new year with tears flooding my eyes. Tears of guilt and shame. Jake thought they were happy tears, and I didn't have the heart to tell him the truth. All I could do was hug him and promise myself that things would change. I couldn't keep doing this to him or to us. The next day, I took action by erasing the contact information of all the men I was cheating on my husband with. I told myself, no more middle-of-the-night messages, no more covert relationships. At one point, I also had to mute specific users on social media and block some just in case. I didn't want any sort of temptation or anything that would make me go back on my words. I instructed myself that I was done with my old lifestyle. So it was going to be New Year, new me. I also stayed away from unnecessary gatherings or any situation that would land me in doing things I shouldn't do. I tried to prove to myself that I could actually do it, that I was the wife that Jake needed. I didn't even give Jake a second to think about Eric's words or let it come to his mind. I began to focus on Jake and make sure I was showing him how much he's valued. To be specific, I prepared his favorite meals, set up dates like a couple, and attempted to be more affectionate whenever we went out. It reminded me of the moment that I had fallen in love with him and I was falling all over again. Or maybe I had simply allowed myself to embrace the love we had been sharing all along. But no matter how much I wished to think I could make everything right, a part of me knew that I didn't deserve Jake. There was always this guilt eating me up. When Jake smiled at me or displayed his love for me, I'd feel uncomfortable, knowing he had no idea what I'd done. In order to focus and enjoy my time with him, I kept reminding myself that the past was irrelevant, and it was only the present that mattered. But that didn't stop the memories from creeping in and haunting me. I would spend hours reminiscing on the moments I had cheated, reliving them in my head and asking what Jake would do if he found out. Still, I was determined to stick to my resolution. I owed Jake this, and I owed myself. I was determined to head in the right direction and take charge of my actions and be intentional about my every step. I didn't expect I'd break that promise of being a faithful wife. I don't know what's wrong with me in cheating. Even in my previous relationships, I had an issue with cheating and only truly felt bad when the man was good to me. And Jake here is the best man ever. When I met him, I never had any intentions of hurting him. I was truly in love with him and still am. I don't know how I slipped. I really can't explain. And I'm not happy about it, and that's why I tried my best to change, to be a better woman and a good wife, but then I couldn't even do that. Here is how I failed myself. My friend was celebrating her birthday and I wanted to go. I told Jake about it and made him know that I didn't really feel like going, even if I knew I should be there. He told me that whatever decision I make, he's sure my friend would understand, and he's here to support me. I thought about it for a while, and then I decided to go. And that was only the 10th day of my New Year's resolutions. I had prepared myself not to do anything stupid, but to strictly stand firm on my words. I decided not to go down the same path again, not to waste my energy on things that wouldn't add any positive value to my marriage or strengthen my relationship with Jake. With that in mind, I had agreed that the party was just going to be a great opportunity for me to prove to myself that I can say no to pleasures outside my marriage. So I texted Jake to let him know I'd be coming home later than I had planned. I lied that the party started late. I didn't want him to be bothered because I didn't know when I'd be done with Eric. I knew it wouldn't be a problem if I gave Jake a good reason why me coming back was going to be delayed. That's why I did that. Then I silenced my phone and put it in my bag. I didn't want to even be distracted. I wanted to enjoy every moment, my last moment, because I won't be doing that again. Then Eric and I left the party, and the next stop was his house. As if on cue, we didn't even spare any second after we got there. We started kissing, and next time, he was already inside of me. Exactly what I needed at that point. The night was filled with moans, and at one point, I was even walking around naked while making us a meal. Because after several rounds, we were tired, so we needed food, and after that, we just lay bare asleep. And when I opened my eyes again, it was the next day, late in the morning. I knew I was doomed. I quickly got up, and Eric muttered some nonsense about morning kisses, and I ignored him and went straight ahead with what I had in mind. That's to cook up an excuse for Jake. When I removed my phone from the bag, I saw several missed calls from Jake. As I was about to text him, I heard a knock at the door, and Eric sluggishly wore his boxer shorts before going to get the door while I stayed in the room. Instantly, he left. The next thing I heard was a sound, like someone being shoved or hit, followed by an ouch. I quickly ran out of the room, shouting, "Eric, Eric," forgetting I was naked. Once I reached the living room, I saw Jake, and that was when I realized I was not wearing a piece of clothing and Eric was lying on the floor, bleeding from his mouth. My head spun, and I couldn't mutter a word in defense. I quickly grabbed a pillow to cover myself because I was very embarrassed. Then Jake said it was good that he listened to this loser called Eric, and that he was happy to have done something without my permission, which was putting a tracker on my phone. That's when I realized Jake had never fallen for my act. He had always suspected me ever since his fight encounter with Eric. I fell on my knees, but then he took a recording of me and Eric as I was pleading for mercy. Then he spat and walked away. I didn't know what to do anymore. I just quickly ran to the room, put on my clothes, and Eric tried to stop me, telling me that it was already over and there's nothing I can do to fix it. I pushed him away and took a taxi back home, hoping to turn the situation around. When I got home, a few cardboard boxes and garbage bags were stacked at the front door. After giving them a closer inspection, I saw that they were indeed my possessions and not trash. My personal belongings were all crammed into those bags and boxes, and then I knocked. There was no response, and I tried to open the door with my key, but the lock had been changed. I stared at my belongings and tears crowded in my eyes. Then it started pouring out. I couldn't believe that Jake could do something like that to me. I mean, where did the kind and understanding Jake go? I never thought he would do something so decisive and absolute. The floor seemed to have been yanked out from under me. I rang him almost immediately, but he didn't pick up. I kept calling his number repeatedly. After a few minutes, each call simply went directly into voicemail. I left countless voice messages, imploring him to speak with me, to simply allow me to explain. Yet I still didn't stand a chance. I started panicking. My mind went into overdrive, imagining the worst. What if he never talked to me again? Is it truly over? What then? I was repeating to myself over and over again that I could fix it, that if I just did something right, he'd come back. But in my heart, I knew it was not that simple. I spent hours crying in the driveway and pacing back and forth before I finally packed everything and left. I ended up at a friend's place because I had no idea where I was going. She was the person I could always rely on. When I showed up on her front porch looking disheveled, she let me in. I explained everything to her. She didn't take my side. Instead, she shouted at me, and I know I deserve all kinds of hate, but at least I was broken. I expected her to be a little bit supportive. After a day, she told me that she could no longer squat me and that I needed to find a place of my own. I couldn't go back to my parents' house. I didn't know what to do. So, I decided to rent my own place, hoping there was at least a little money left in our joint account. What I didn't know was that Jake had already cut me off. He had always controlled the money, writing the checks, buying the groceries, handling everything. I had left my job 2 years ago to focus on our marriage, a choice we made together. But now that safety net is gone. I found out the hard way. I went to the bank, planning to withdraw enough to get by for a while. But when I checked our joint account, it was empty. Jake had moved everything into his own account, leaving me with nothing. I didn't even have enough to cover the rent for the tiny apartment I had managed to find. It wasn't just the financial blow that knocked the wind out of me. It was realizing that Jake was done fighting for me. He had been my rock for years, always stepping in to amend things when I messed up. But now he doesn't care to solve anything. He was done. And I was on my own. Then I found out that Jake had told my parents everything, the affair and the lies. I went to them, hoping for sympathy, but my mom wouldn't even look at me. My dad just shook his head and walked away. That's when I realized I'd lost my family too. The isolation was crushing. Most of our friends had vanished from my side, even those who pretended to be neutral. Jake made it clear I was no longer his problem. no more shielding me from the mess I created, and honestly, I didn't deserve it. And now he's out there living, traveling, laughing, posting pictures where he looked lighter, happier, like losing me had set him free, and that stung the most. Update. I thought that writing and venting here would help me find peace, but rather, I feel a lot worse. Like I mentioned in my last post, I'm not here to offer excuses or garner sympathy because I know that I don't deserve either. I'm just here to share my update and also hoping that maybe someone else will learn from my mistakes. Now, in hindsight, I can see how selfish I was. I had everything a woman would want in life, a great husband and a secure life, yet I threw it all away for nothing. My choices were mine to make, and the consequences that followed are no one's fault but mine. None of it was fair to Jake. He didn't deserve to be lied to, used, or have his trust broken. I know how painful it is to love someone only to find out it was all a lie, so I have to deal with the pain I caused him for the rest of my life. The fact that I know I can never undo what I've done is the worst aspect of it all. I can never withdraw the pain I inflicted or the harm I brought to our marriage. All I can do at this point is live in regret and hope to be a better person, even though it's too late to repair what I've ruined. I was presented with divorce papers. Although it was painful to have received them, I know it's what my actions resulted in. If I've learned anything from this, it's that actions have consequences. Living your life with the belief that you can do anything you want and get away with it is not possible. The truth will eventually come to light, and you will have to face it. And sometimes dealing with it means losing everything. I know I'm not the best person to give advice after what I've done, but I hope my mistakes serve as a warning to those cheating. Don't take the people in your life for granted. Love and trust aren't endless. They break. And once they're gone, there's no getting them back. Right now, Jake has moved on, and I'm glad for him. He deserves happiness and respect. As for me, I'm still figuring things out. It's not easy, but I have to try for myself and for everyone I let down.